Hi, welcome to Formula Citizen, episode 4. I'm your host, Nate Godfrey. Thank you for listening. I'm going to start with an apology. I lost my laptop for a good 2 weeks in the middle of a flyaway triple header, and I haven't been able to record any podcasts. So I'm coming to you tonight with a triple header recap. Plenty of action to talk about over the last month with kind of back-to-back-to-back races. So we're going to cover off the Japanese Grand Prix, the Bahrain Grand Prix, and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It's been a busy month of Formula One. But before we do that, I wanted to speak about a couple of off-the-track meetings that have taken place that are significant for the sport longer term. And I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to this stuff, but it's important to understand the direction of the sport from a governance perspective, leadership perspective, and I'm always interested in those insights because I guess it tends to shape the direction of the sport. So first meeting I want to talk about was between the FIA, the governing body for motorsport, Formula One, and the team owners. And there was this motion to reintroduce V10 engines. It was unanimously rejected by the teams, I think because of the significant investment they've already made preparing for the 2026 season with these rule changes to the sport and the demand for higher levels of electrical deployment from the engines. And then in saying that, we've had this motion to return to V10 engines. That's a little bit confusing. Was this a political play by the president to position himself for the upcoming election later this year? In episode 1 of Formula Citizen, I spoke about some of the leadership challenges that were facing the FIA, in particular the president, Mohammed bin Salem. And was this, I guess, a chance for the teams to push back as well, right, in terms of what they're seeing from the governing body and just making a statement? From my perspective as a fan, love that sound, miss the V10 engine, but clearly the sport and the automotive industry is moving towards electrical deployment. Is there an opportunity to look at synthetic fuels within a V10 engine? We'll wait and see, but clearly a lack of strategic alignment between the sport and the industry, and some politics taking place at a higher level as well. So we'll wait and see how that plays out, but that could shape the future of the sport beyond 2030. The other really important meeting that's taken place just in the last few days was with the Formula One bosses and the F1 Commission. And they've agreed in principle to a mechanism that would allow engine manufacturers that are faced with performance shortfalls in 2026 when they move to the new rule changes to play catch up. So this one's really interesting for me. It potentially signals that the rule change is so significant that none of the manufacturers, none of the teams right now have got a really fair gauge on where they're at in terms of the development targets. And they're looking to have an insurance policy in place if they start next season and find out that they're not as competitive as they thought they were. So I think this is smart. I think it's a good thing in terms of the Formula One product, that it protects the competition, right? The best competitions in the world, the best leagues in the world are competitive, highly competitive. And Formula One has to have a fan base that believes that their teams are competitive and stand a chance of winning races or at least scoring podiums regularly. And I think this safeguards that moving forward. So no one wants to see an uncompetitive team. So we have this potential next year where if a team is falling short, that they're able to play catch up. It's only an agreement in principle. We'll wait and see how it plays out in reality, but a really important step in terms of next year's Formula One season. All right, let's talk about the triple header. So much to discuss. I'm going to start with kind of an overarching summary of the 3 races, right? So race 3 in Japan, race 5 in Saudi Arabia were pretty similar for me. The track conditions, they had low tire deg, a little bit straightforward. They were clearly fast-flowing tracks, which favoured Red Bull in terms of their performance. They won in Japan. We'll talk more about Max's performance in qualifying in Suzuka soon, but they were only 2.5 seconds behind McLaren in Saudi Arabia as well. So clearly plenty to be encouraged about if you're a Red Bull fan. Bahrain was the outlier, right? So we've got hot conditions, an abrasive track surface, and the McLaren cars clearly look after their tyres better. So that's giving them that performance edge at the moment. But clearly what we're seeing across a sample pool now of 5 races is that the performance is still track dependent. McLaren may have a small edge, but it's still track dependent. In terms of the 3 races, Japan, very strategic race, not a lot of action. There were some team orders from McLaren, I believe. I clearly think they could have split strategies. Maybe they were taking a more conservative approach early in the season and banking points. Nothing wrong with that. But the low temperatures at that track on race day clearly favoured Red Bull and gave Max enough of an edge that he was able to hold on for the win. In Bahrain, a bit of a boring race with the exception of this random safety car that took place on lap 38. The highlight for me was probably watching George Russell hang on to second place at the end of the race when he had all of these technical issues in the cockpit. Just think about his car, his dashboard on his steering wheel shutting down, and he's literally trying to hang on to second place in the race and reset the computer and speak to his team, and he was having communication challenges. And opened up the DRS flat by mistake. And it's just the management under that kind of duress in that environment was incredible to watch. And then Saudi Arabia. So we're in Jeddah for the third race of the triple header. It was a one-stop race strategy, which probably took away some of the entertainment again. There was no offset tyre strategies from the teams, and it created a pretty straightforward race. The only excitement or the only entertainment for me was kind of watching Lando move his way back through the pack, having started 10th on the grid. Now, in episode 1 of Formula Citizen, I did talk about the fact that I believed Oscar could be the 2025 Formula One world champion. I mounted a case based on data, right? Based on his qualifying performance, if he took a step. He's clearly taken that step. And we're going to see this play out now throughout the whole season. In episode 3, I also talked about, the intra-team rivalry and this idea that it'll be defined by moments. And for me, those moments are driven as much by pressure and psychology as they are by skill. That's what we're starting to see. That's the thing that fascinates me the most about elite sport is the psychology. So when we saw Oscar win in China, he clearly responded to the performance in Melbourne and demonstrated resilience and bounced back really strongly, had a great weekend in China. And then the pressure shifts to Lando and we say, well, let's see how he responds to Oscar winning the second race of the season and making a statement. So we get to the triple header. We're in Japan, and I just want to run through firstly the psychology, right? It plays out in body language. It plays out in comments made in the media. So I want to talk about some of that first before we talk about the actual incidents. So Lando has made a statement in Bahrain in qualifying after he's made a mistake and qualified behind Oscar, where he said, "I'm clueless." And then he's gone on to say, "I feel like I've never driven a Formula One car before." They are not the words of an aspiring Formula One champion. He's subsequently talked about how he puts too much pressure on himself, trying to explain his performances, and all that ends up happening is you end up explaining the explanation, and then you're in this downward spiral. Alex Brundle described it as a ripple effect, where you're constantly trying to justify your performance or lack of performance. So a really interesting headspace for him. And on the flip side, if you compare that psychology and some of that language that we're starting to see, that self-talk, that negative self-talk, Oscar's the opposite. He's talking, the language is, I'm feeling confident. I trust the car. I'm really proud of the way I've bounced back from my performance in Melbourne. So he's talking about his resilience. And then he says things like, I'm proud that the work I did in the off-season is paying off now. So he's reinforcing internally to himself that the work he's done is paying off and he needs to continue on that path. But he's also reinforcing it to the outside world, right? He's making this statement that I've done the work. So that's kind of some of the commentary that I saw, which was really interesting in terms of the psychology and how it's playing out. But if we just look at the actual performances on track, it tells a story over the last 3 races, right? So in a period of 3 weeks, Lando Norris is in Japan. He's behind Max, coming out of the pit lane. Could have waited, was right behind him, and potentially put a move on during the race. And decided his best opportunity in the race to pass Max was coming out of the pit lane, and decided to drive onto the grass to do that. For me, that looked like a desperate move. It looked like a guy who didn't believe that he could pass Max on track, and that was his best chance to do it. And it potentially cost him a race win. Then we move forward. He arrives in Bahrain for the race, having made a mistake in qualifying, and starts his car in front of the start line and receives a 5-second penalty. That's a rookie mistake. To put the car in gear and creep forward twice in front of the start line talks a lot about his psychology. He crashed in Jeddah, which has been well documented. For me, the bigger piece is not the crash in qualifying, but it was actually the race. So he's coming through the pack. He lost 1.9 seconds to Lewis Hamilton over 3 laps, trying to manage the DRS zones and trying to get past him. And I believe that cost him 3rd place. He finished 4th by 1.2 seconds. And the Ferrari team have come out and said that he lost about 1.9 seconds in that duel with Lewis Hamilton. And then you want to compare that with Oscar, who passed Lewis Hamilton in Saudi Arabia off the racing line at high speeds. That pass was critical to the race win, right? So clinical in terms of his execution. Oscar's had 82 less races than Lando, and right now those 2 drivers had both got 5 wins, 5 career wins. The other thing I want to speak to in terms of Oscar's performance and this kind of step that he's taken is no one's talking about the fact that he's got a new performance coach. In the off-season, he hired a new performance coach, a guy from Finland called Arturi Simila. And he's been working really closely with him, clearly physically trying to develop him, and it's making a difference, right? But no one's talking about that. So I just wanted to note that he has got a new performance coach, and it's clearly helping his performance in the car. I want to move forward and just kind of cover off some comments that Max made about the two of them, right? Because everyone's got an opinion on Lando and Oscar, but Max is the guy that's going wheel to wheel with these two drivers and can judge their performance the best. And he's come out and made some statements about Oscar just in the last few days, that he really makes mistakes, that he's calm under pressure, puts the car in all the right places and has some good people around him in terms of his mentor, his manager, Mark Webber, and, is a serious threat. So in Max's eyes, the guy who's a 4-time world champion and is in a championship battle with Lando and Oscar, I think you're starting to see where he thinks the threat is coming from and where the biggest risk is for him in terms of winning a 5th title. Just giving Oscar a lot of respect in terms of how he started the season with 3 race wins already from 5 races. All right, moving forward, got to talk about Lewis Hamilton and his challenges. There's this general view that the next few months will be career-defining for Lewis Hamilton. The guy Lewis has replaced at Ferrari is driving a Williams at the moment. He's out-qualified him in the last 2 Grand Prix. That's a fact. Martin Brundle made the comment where he said it's troubled times for Lewis, which I thought was really interesting for him to come out and make that statement. And then Karun Chandok in the last few days on the Formula One Sky Sports podcast has just been talking about some of the data. And the data suggests that the gap between him and Charles Leclerc, his teammate at Ferrari, is trending the wrong way, right? So after China, where Lewis was strong, the gap in Japan was 0.3, it was 0.59 in Bahrain, and then, he finishes the race in Saudi Arabia 31 seconds behind Charles Leclerc, which is kind of 0.6 of a second per lap. The reality is we've seen this decline over the last couple of seasons at Mercedes in terms of qualifying speed, just raw speed, right? Or is it the ground effect cars? Has he actually struggled since 2022 when we moved to a new rule change? And so these are the questions we're asking. We're not going to form a view yet. He's a 7-time world champion. You would be crazy to write him off. But right now, he is under pressure. There's the world's expectations on his shoulders, and I'm sure he's placing that pressure on himself as well. What I want to talk about the most, again, is the psychology here around Lewis Hamilton at the moment. Look, Lewis's body language after races has dramatically changed. His energy, his spirit, his ability to articulate what's wrong with the car and give the fans confidence he knows where the solution is, he's simply lost that. He looks utterly dejected at times. And to be honest with you, I think he looks like Sergio and Daniel towards the end of their careers. Big statement, I know, but that's what I'm starting to see in terms of the psychology and the commentary around his performances. So let's see if he can turn that around. I think we all give him till the middle of the season to see if he can start getting on top of this car. But at the moment, he's clearly struggling. All right, I want to move on and talk about some of the rookies. We've had 5 races now. We've had this opportunity to look at the 6 rookies that we spoke about at the start of the year. We have this segment called Rookie Watch. Clearly, we're seeing a couple of drivers as standouts, right, with real talent. Kimi Antonelli at Mercedes, Isaac Hadjar at the Racing Bulls are clearly the best of this crop of young drivers. Kimi's qualifying behind George, but he's right behind him, and he's going to be a serious competition given he's only 18 years old right now. He's sitting on 38 points. He's 6th in the championship. If you're Mercedes, you are so happy with the decision that you've made to put him in that race seat. Bearing in mind he's taken over a seat that was, that a 7 times world champion was driving in. So he's doing an incredible job, exceeding expectations. And I think in the back end of the year, we're going to see some really outstanding performances. The other performances I wanted to note was Carlos Sainz. I touched on it before, but he's clearly getting on top of the car. And he's starting to out-qualify Alex Albon, and he's scoring regular points now as well. So clearly demonstrating they just need a little bit of time to get his head around the Williams car. Yuki, I know in episode 3 we spoke about the decision that Red Bull had made to replace Liam Lawson with Yuki Tsunoda. We all know this, so we should just acknowledge it. Yuki is inconsistent. He was 0.9 of a second behind Max in Saudi qualifying when Max was on pole. In Japan, he was 15th. When Max was on pole. I don't know that he has been any better than Liam Lawson in that respect. Aston Martin, let's just forget about it for this season. They are 100% focused on 2026. There's been these rumours that just circulate in the middle of the triple header around Max's future and the fact that Aston Martin has tabled a 3-year offer, 250 plus million euros move across to Aston Martin. So where there's smoke, there's fire in Formula One. If those rumours are true, then Max has a very important decision to make at the end of the season. At the moment, it'd be hard for him to make that call with the way Aston Martin's performing unless there's some guarantees behind the scenes that the new partnership with Honda and the introduction of Adrian Newey as the designer, and the fact that the organization is solely focused on the design of their 2026 car may give him a degree of confidence and maybe prepared to take that kind of leap of faith. But at the moment, you've got two drivers that are contracted to the team, and one of those two drivers is the son of the owner, the billionaire owner, Lawrence Stroll. 3 doesn't go into 2. So I'm really interested to see what happens if Max does sign and make that announcement later this year. He's moving to Aston Martin in 2026. What does that mean for Fernando Alonso as a 2-time world champion? He's got a contract to drive next year. Or is Lawrence Stroll asking his son Lance to step down for a year? Look, son, I've got a 4-time world champion joining a 2-time world champion in my team, and I need you to just take a year off, have a sabbatical, and you can watch from the sidelines while these two boys dupe it out. Just a quick shout out to Haas as a team, always the underdog. They've been collecting good points regularly. They're currently 6th in the Constructors' Championship. They're only 5 points behind Williams, who are sitting 5th. We wouldn't have said that at the start of the year. And both teams you've got 2 regular scoring drivers. So that'll be a really interesting battle throughout the year, that battle for 5th, and obviously millions and millions of dollars in prize money at stake as well. Alpine have stuck with Jack Doohan. There was this rumor that he had a clause in his contract after race 5 where he could be replaced, and they haven't replaced him. So it's nice to see. I'm just going to close out with this statement about where the sport's at. Now, there's been all of this hype in the off-season, and at the moment, the championship is clearly living up to that. Martin Brundle, love Martin's work. He is the godfather of Formula One, and he made this statement recently where he kind of just summed up Formula One and where it's at right now in terms of popularity and competitiveness. He said, we've got Alonso and Hamilton as senior figures in Formula One, 9 world titles between them. You've got Max with another 4 world titles in the peak of his powers at the moment. You've got a crazy amount of rookies with huge talent. And then you've got this middle group of kind of 20-somethings who have got plenty of experience, who on their day can shine as well. It's a really talented grid at the moment with some great characters, with some great personalities, and it's just really, from a fan's perspective, it's really enhancing the experience at the moment, which is great. I'm going to close with this comment from the McLaren team principal, where he talked about Oscar Piastri, and he just simply said this, and it's scary. He said, there's no noise in Oscar's head. And that's what we're starting to see. When there's no noise in your head, there's clarity. He's going to be hard to beat this year. He's the favourite now. The pressure's shifted to Lando, and I cannot wait for the Miami Grand Prix next week. Thank you so much for listening.